How long does it take you to get ready and arrive at work? Let's say, for argument's sake, it takes 90 minutes. In that 90 minutes, you're probably using water, electricity, food, and fuel. In that same 90 minutes, how many people do you think are added to the earth that would require the same resources? Would you believe 100, 200, maybe even 500? Well, estimates say that within that 90 minutes, the earth will have acquired a net gain of 13,025 people. Hello, my name is Dustin Kane. Thank you for having me at this year's American Public University System Symposium on current science knowledge in support of popular science writing. Today, I will present an overview of Sparing Nature, the conflict between human population growth and Earth's biodiversity by Jeffrey McKee, and how the ideas in this book are relevant to science today. Jeffrey McKee is a professor of anthropology at Ohio State University. He has been an educator there since 1996 and has also advised and educated in human and primate ecology and anatomy, as well as evolutionary human anatomy. Professor McKee has been published more than 50 times, 4 of which include books. His fieldwork includes digs at Mammoth Cave, Kentucky, and a principal investigator at McKee in South Africa. The book was written as a literature bridge between what has already been studied and written and the concepts within those studies on population growth and biodiversity concepts. McKee has 2 main messages for his book. The first is there is a connection between human population growth and biodiversity loss that goes back over 1,000,000 years, and that becomes particularly evident in the past 10,000 years. Second, the greatest and most effective conservation measure to save Earth's biodiversity is to halt the growth of human population and perhaps reduce our numbers. Within the book, several major topics emerge. The first is human growth population. Here, the book talks about exponential growth and questions what is the Earth's actual carrying capacity for humans. The author both opens and closes on this subject with an ecocentric style of view, saying again, human population reduction is the ultimate key to keeping biodiversity. Once a foundation of estimated numbers has been established, the dilemma resource consumption is highlighted. Within this topic are all the major subthemes: deforestation, land acquisition for agriculture or infrastructure, and species exploitation. McKee highlights this best with an exercise where every individual on the planet has an equal piece of land. It was then showed how each piece of land was divided for resources, and that when the higher population some 3 decades later was increased, there was a noticeable difference in the wilderness. It was gone. It had been completely used up to support humans. The final theme is the importance of biodiversity. McKee discusses connections between species and ecosystems, the role of these ecosystems play, as well as keystone and invasive species. In the book, McKee demonstrates that even at a modest 0.01% growth rate, 20 individuals would reach 65 million in 150,000 years. However, the growth rate is much higher than that. It is pointed out that while everyone was worried about Y2K, another event was taking place. The Earth had reached a population of 6 billion people. It had doubled in just 39 years. A decade after this book was published, a study on human population growth and bird occupancy was published. In the study, it was estimated that at the current rates, the net gain of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts would result in 1.2 million by the year 2030. With this growth comes expansion. A study was conducted utilizing identified urban and rural spots for occupancy counting. It was estimated that if expansions reached the defined areas, there would be a 38% reduction in occupancy by 5 species of birds. This occupancy reduction would ultimately lead to other effects that we'll discuss later. Nearly 15 years after the book was published, there remains to be studies that summarize the same conclusion. Human growth rate is exponential. And by 2050, the Earth's population could reach 9.8 billion and potentially top out at 11.2 billion in 2100. How will we support this? The book highlights 3 areas of concern when it comes to resources. First is deforestation in the tropics, resulting in a massive biodiversity loss compared to the mere 13% of global cropland yielded from it. Agricultural land appropriation and conversion is the next topic. McKee points out that although Ohio used to be 95% forested area, by 1900 that was reduced to just 12%. Furthermore, the conversion of agricultural land to urban land reduces natural biodiversity, disturbs soil, and reduces carbon sequestration. The third topic in resources and species is species exploitation. As humans have expanded, there have been many species of animals and plants that have been hunted into or on the brink of extinction. A 2015 study on the change in biodiversity based on urban sprawl concluded the same ideas as McKee. While human-tolerant bird species increased in the area, both in density and occupancy, the addition of non-native plant life and methods of expansion resulted in a decline of overall biodiversity within the area study. This is direct support for McKee's theme that population growth results in biodiversity loss. The importance of biodiversity is the final theme I will discuss with you today. McKee utilizes examples of how species within an ecosystem are connected. A clear representation was how human interaction resulted in a trophic effect. Beavers altered the landscape, allowing more deer to populate in the area. The deer carried a parasitic brainworm that devastated the moose population. The book then discusses the roles of ecosystems and how the tropics, a major source of carbon sequestration, affects weather and climate patterns globally. Likewise, a dramatic shift from one biome to another, such as a forest turned into an urban sprawl, has an effect on local weather as heat is allowed to escape or refract from the surface rather than being utilized by dense plant life. The role of keystone species and our invasive behavior also contributes to the concept of biodiversity importance. The removal of a keystone species has cascading trophic effects that greatly affect the ecosystem. Just like the otters control the sea urchin population, and sea stars control tidal populations of mussels. However, when a non-native species is introduced and begins to fill the niche of other species and outcompetes them for natural resources, they are said to be invasive, much like the zebra or quagga mussels in the Great Lakes and across the western states. Humans can also be considered invasive. Referring back to the connection of species, it was human interaction that ultimately led to the moose population decline. And previous themes throughout the book suggest we absolutely outcompete for resource use. Although the book is less than 2 decades old, what does recent science say about the importance of biodiversity? Well, a 2015 study based on functions within an ecosystem utilized algorithms and 192 repeated scenarios with functions ranging from 2 to 12 and biodiversity ranging from low to maximum supported in the area. The study found that as biodiversity decreases, so too does the availability of remaining species to meet the required ecosystem functions. In fact, when the scenario had dense occupancy of key monospecies, functions could not be supported beyond 1%. Without biodiversity, the ecosystem changes. When the ecosystem change, they alter the area around them and globally. Additional support for the importance of biodiversity comes from a 2016 study in the Everglades. The author of this study wanted to determine if the invasive python or anthropogenic effects were the cause for the decline in marsh rabbits. After several years of studying, it was concluded that in 20 years since the python's release, mammalian sightings declined by 95%. In that decline were included marsh rabbits. Considered to be potentially a keystone species, the authors fear trophic effects will follow should the python's population continue to grow and rabbit populations decline. While the book laid out examples and sources of studies that support the author's claim, there are some questions that remain unanswered. With the population growing exponentially, what is Earth's carrying capacity for humans? What changes will have to be made in the next 30 years to support 9 billion people? What about 80 years to support 11 billion? Within this growth and race to find productive measures to feed the population, we will inevitably reach a genetic peak with livestock and crops. Will we design a genetically superior wheat or potato that has no more potential and is left at risk to natural evolution of its predators? These are questions the scientific community must continue to investigate. McKee also pointed out that while growth at this current rate is inevitable, practices of small individual conservation can play a role in humans' adverse impact on the earth. These include reduced water usage, simply by not allowing the tap to run when you are getting ready in the morning. Recycle that plastic cup that you used on your drive, and omit idling or driving around just to look for a closer parking spot. He then urges the community to continue ecological research. The study of connected species is both young and very complex, but vital to understand how to best mitigate future actions to reduce biodiversity loss. In conclusion, while Sparing Nature was written in 2003, continual research is produced to support the ideas McKee presented. From continued research, we can say, human population without natural predators and through advancement of technology will see a continual growth rate even though the rate is dropping. The pressure on these resources and human actions created by this growth will result in biodiversity loss affecting all species globally over time. However, there is a spark of hope. For that, we turn to biophilia. This is the innate or subconscious connections humans have to nature. The desire to keep some form of natural wonder transcends language, politics, and all other socio-cultural barriers. This internal desire or wonder is fuel for the required action to study and understand our place and action in biodiversity. As Barry Commoner said, the proper use of science is not to conquer nature, but to live within it. Thank you.